This episode is sponsored by Bezer Wizard Studio. Episode 21 of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candice Harris, and I'm super excited to be here in person with my good friend and one of my absolute favorite people to play board games with, Ben Mandelker from the Game Brain podcast. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Candice. What's going on?
Not much. I'm excited to be in your office today recording this. You know, this is only the second time I've recorded a BGG podcast episode in person with my guest co-host. So,
I feel very honored to be part of your second live in-person recording of the podcast. I had told myself this week I was not going to podcast. But when you said, can we do it this week? I was like, well, obviously, of course, because I can always podcast about board games. Like, I will always make time to pontificate and talk about these things.
And yes, and that's because Ben's full-time job is running a podcast.
I am a full-time podcaster. I have a podcast called Watch What Crappens, which has nothing to do with board games whatsoever. It's all about Bravo TV and like Real Housewives and things like that. But
if you're into that, check it out.
Yeah, I mean, people are always asking me, "Oh, are you gonna design a board game about the Real Housewives?" And I'm like, I would love to. I would love
crossover,
to.
Yeah.
I know, but I don't know how to do it. But
we'll get
TBD.
you there. We'll get you there. What's new with you though?
Not much. I mean, I've just been like playing lots of games. Again, like for Watch What Crappens, we just finished. We had a tour. We were touring across the country, and so we just finished. So I really have been digging into this week of just relaxing, playing as many games as possible, cooking, more games. But I'm really excited to talk about games with you because I will always talk about board games.
I know, and we both talk a lot.
We talk a lot.
Talking about board games, so we're going to try not to make this episode 5 hours long.
I know, but in case we do, everyone, choose your like bathroom breaks and get all your beverages ready, because this could be kind of epic.
Yes, it will be epic. So,
and I'm drinking coffee, which means I'm caffeinated. So everyone just better watch out.
Today, we're going to be talking about 18xx, which sounds pretty dirty, but it's really just a genre of board games that Ben and I happen to both love and adore. And whether you're familiar with 18xx or not, we're going to tell you what it's all about from our kind of experiences, why we love 18xx games, and we'll also make some recommendations for games to check out.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk about this. I mean, I'm like, this is going to be me all episode. I am so excited, guys. But I really am, and especially because by the way, the Venn diagram of 18xx board games and Real Housewives is very small. And I feel like I might be the sole occupant of it. But 18xx games have kind of taken over my life. And I'm deeply, deeply, deeply obsessed with them. And I'm on a mission to spread the word to the masses beyond sort of the niche that it occupies in our hobby.
Yeah, and I think Ben and I, we both got into 18xx back in 2020, I believe.
Yeah, during the height of the pandemic. Yeah. It was something I was always 18xx curious. But thanks to the website 18xx.games, which has a ton of 18xx games that you can play online, it's a wonderful site, and it just made it very accessible while we were all, at home isolating.
Yeah, and I think my very first game was with Jennifer Schlickburn and Bruce, and they taught me 18 Chesapeake. And I remember because it was still the summer of 2020, so people were starting to get together but play outside or still playing with masks on and everything. But I walked away from my first game of 18 Chesapeake and I was like, I have to buy this. I love this. Why did I wait so long to try these games?
Yeah, they're super fun. Jennifer also, technically she didn't teach me my first game. My first game I tried to learn at Strategicon. It was 1862, and we're gonna get into what all this means. But 1862 is on the deep end of like it is a crazy game, and the thing that I just like stepped into it like sure, I feel like I'm smart. I play board games. I know rules. I'll be fine. And I was like, oh my God.
And you play heavy board games
I play heavy board games. And I was like, but by the way, don't let the story make anyone feel like scared.
Right.
It was just one of those things where I went on the deep end of this genre. And then during the pandemic, Jennifer taught me 18 Chesapeake also on 18xx.games. And then I was like, oh yeah, this is my new favorite thing of all time.
We're also going to share some of our initial impressions of 1880 China, since we had the opportunity to actually play a game of it together. Like maybe it was like a month ago at this point.
Yeah, it was about a month ago.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect game to center this discussion around because because it's amazing. Because it's such a good game.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert is so good.
But before we start talking about 18XX and 18 China, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Ben, even though I know some of it. But let's jump into fresh plays.
Okay, well, one of my fresh plays one of the games I played recently is ZhanGuo, which is a game from. Have you played that ever before?
I have not played it yet. I own it. I bought a copy. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you will love it.
I still haven't played it. I just feel like I know I'm going to love it.
You will love it. Okay, so it came out actually in 2014. The designers are Marco Canetta and Stefania Nicolini. It's published by What's Your Game and is for 2 to 4 players. But interestingly enough, Sorry We're French is doing a re-implementation that's coming out soon. Awesome. They're also the same people who re-implemented Iki and made it like the sensation that it is today.
Right.
So they did a great job with that, and I would have kept my copy of their version because I actually have the OG Iki right there, and I just love it too much. Even though I love the changes in the new one, I can't give up my original Iki.
Until the expansion comes out.
I know I'm gonna have to get it again because now like the expansion is not gonna work with the OG Iki, which is just a shame. Anyway, ZhanGuo it's a great game. It is a heavy card-based game where you're building your own little tableau, but you're also doing stuff on the board. And essentially what happens is that as you build out your tableau in this game, you are adding bonuses to certain actions. So like, for instance, if you want to contribute to the Great Wall of China, you take a certain action to do that. You do like the wall action. And as you build out your tableau, something might happen where like, oh, when you do the wall action, maybe you get a resource, or maybe you get to move something or whatever, because you get that bonus. And the game it's really important to hit your bonuses in this game. But where the shtick of the game comes in is every time you take an action, you can either build your tableau or you basically can play a card to take an action. Like if I wanted to take that wall action, I have to play a card to the board. And all the cards are numbered. And if you play a card that is like, if your card is a higher number than the card that is already sitting there on the board, because it's like a single stack, sort of like a Concordia. Once you put a card on there, if your card has a higher value, then you get the bonus of the wall, for the wall action, for instance, in this example. If it's lower, you just only do a basic vanilla wall action, and you never want to do basic vanilla. So it's all about like building out bonuses on your tableau and then being able to actually use those bonuses. And you have to, through the card play, you're like, you see someone puts down like a 30 and you've got a 70 in your hand. You're like, okay, can I do something else before I put the 70 down? Or then someone else puts like 110 and then you're like, oh my God, I can't get my bonus anymore. So it's all about timing your cards as they go down. And it's an excellent game.
Yeah. And what's your game? Like I'm pretty sure I've mentioned on this podcast before, just I love so many what's your game games like Nippon. We both love Nippon. Madeira
so good.
is great. But yeah, this one, it sounds like right up my alley. So I bought a copy secondhand from someone on the geek market at some point, and I just haven't gotten it to the table yet. But I'm so glad that Sorry We're Not French is, putting out a new version so it's more accessible, because I think it was a little hard for me to track down a copy of it.
Yeah, and I think that there was I think What's Your Game was supposed to be doing like a re-release of it with even an expansion, but they had some issues with their company over the past few years, and I don't know, did they abandon that? Did Sorry We're French come in to save it? Not sure, but like whatever the version is anyone winds up stumbling upon, like maybe someone's listening to this in like 2 years. It is like a really interesting, thinky game. And the funny thing is that after I played that game, we then played Lisboa right after. And it's very similar in that you're playing a single card to a region and you're going to activate something with that single card. But like how you do it is going to be impactful. So it's just a really great, thinky, deep game that really deserves some sort of like rediscovery by people. So that is ZhanGuo. From What's Your Game by Marco Canetta and Stefano Niccolini.
Yeah, and ZhanGuo is ZhanGuo. I guess it'll be in the notes, but
yeah, but it's good. People may not know.
And wondering.
Yeah, it's to go along with our theme of 1880 China. This is like, I don't know what year it takes place, but it's Chinese themed today.
So for the past year or so, I've had multiple friends kind of express interest in learning, because they know I love coin games, and they were like, oh, can we play Cuba Libre? And so I finally got a date scheduled on the calendar, and we were planning to do it last Saturday. And one person had something come up and had to rain check, and then we couldn't get a fourth. And then another person had to bail. So then there were two of us. And we were like, oh, should we just rain check, or should we try to do something 2 players? And we ended up playing Imperial Struggle, which we had both played before. I had only played once, maybe the year it came out, I think, which is 2020. Either 2021 or 2020, I played it for the first time. But my friend Christian had played it a couple times, but also it was like a while ago. But we were like, hey, let's, we'll kind of fumble through it. Yeah, refresh ourselves a little bit. And Imperial Struggle is designed by Ananda Gupta and Jason Matthews. They are the designers who also created Twilight Struggle. And this was kind of like a spiritual successor to Twilight Struggle, even though the games play very differently. There's like a little bit of overlap with like area influence stuff that's happening. But it's also a 2-player game. It's from GMT Games. And Imperial Struggle is a multi-layered area influence game that depicts the 18th century global rivalry between France and Britain, and it covers like almost 100 years of history and 4 major wars. You basically are playing, like, there's this like big, beautiful map that has 4 different regions: North America, Europe, the Caribbean, and India. And you play over 6 turns, 6 peace turns, shall I say. And then there are also occasionally a peace turn is interrupted with a war. So then there are 4 war phases, as we know from history. Yep. So it covers the War of Spanish Succession, the War of Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War, and then the American War of Independence.
Okay.
So again, you have this big board that has all like these divided into these 4 major areas, and then within each region or area, there are a bunch of little spaces, and there are different shaped spaces. Like diamonds are political spaces. There are market spaces that'll have some type of like resource or good. There are circle spaces. There's like some forts and naval spaces, and there are also like squares, which are territories. So you have this map of all these different spaces. There are different types of spaces. And again, this is like a multi-layered area influence game, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm
already stressed, by the way. By the way, I just want to say I'm already very stressed out. It's because
Ben is committed to learning this game.
Because after this is done, we're playing it, and I've never played it before, and I'm just stressed. I'm stressed.
Don't be. It's not that crazy. It's one of those games that like looks crazier than it is, but a lot of what you're going to be doing in the game is going to be like flagging and unflagging these different spaces. And because there's a whole thing with like you're scoring different things where you're trying to get the majority of your flags. And I want the majority of my flags, but you can't do everything.
That's why I'm stressed because
you already know.
Because as you say, there's this area and this area. I'm already thinking to like 3 hours from now, and I'm like, do I put something in the market? Do I put something over in the War of Succession? Like I already can see myself melting down.
You're gonna be okay though.
Okay,
you're gonna be okay. But
can we just be all peace turns?
There are a lot of. This is one of my favorite parts about this game. There are a lot of really interesting decisions. But at the end of each peace turn, there's a scoring phase, and you're going to evaluate each of the 4 regions and see, first of all, who has the most flags and squadrons. You might have some squadrons out there, but whoever has the most is going to get whatever's on this award tile. So each of these 4 areas will have a random award tile, and you'll either get victory points and or treaty points. And treaty points are basically bonus action points. It's good. Yeah. It's good, but victory
Everyone
points.
Loves a treaty.
Yeah. But victory points are also good.
Can't spell treaty without treat.
So after you score each region, there are also these prestige regions that have a green border. So whoever has the most prestige regions gets 2 points. Right. And then you score the global demand. So you have these 6 global demand tiles, like there are different resources, fish, tobacco, spice, cotton. I don't remember the other ones. Maybe spice. Did I say that? I don't know. You
said spice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, anyway, you have these 6 global demand tiles. Silk. And every peace turn, you're going to shuffle them up and reveal 3. Okay. And those are the 3 that are going to get scored for the round.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like it's different than in Twilight Struggle where you just like a scoring card gets introduced and then you don't know where it's going to come.
Right. Exactly. So you have these global demand tiles that there'll be 3 visible, and those are also going to score. And they have a little table that says what you get, depending on what round it is. So... But the cool thing is, so that's like some of the core scoring. But then the action selection in this game is really cool because you have this little board that has these investment tiles. They're just like action spaces. Okay. You can almost think of this as like a worker placement game almost, where the worker placement spaces change throughout the game. Oh, so you'll have 9 tiles out, and each player is going to get to take four turns. So one at a time. You're going to pick one of the tiles and you're going to get a certain amount of action points to do something. Right. And there are 3 different types of action points. There are economic, there are political or diplomacy, or economic, diplomatic, and military. Okay. So that's just like the categories. And it's mostly like, if you do economic, you're going to get to do something on those market spaces, like maybe unflag something I did.
Yeah, get out of that market.
Yeah. Get yourself into a market.
It's my market. Those are my spices.
Exactly. So each of these investment tiles will have 2 numbers always. One is going to be big, and it's going to be your major action. So maybe you have 4 economic action points as your major, and then the bottom is like 2 military. So then you're going to get to do 2 points of military stuff. Yeah, and 4 points of economic stuff. Now, some of these tiles also will have this little cross-looking sword icon, and that means if you take one of those, you can play an event card. Because each round, we have 3 event cards in our hand. And the event cards in this game are cool. Because most of them, I think almost all of them, have some kind of bonus you can get, some kind of bonus effect. And the event cards are like, there's one effect for France, there's one effect for Britain. Sometimes it's just the same effect. But like on the investment tiles that have the event icon, you always get less action points. So you have to think like, do I want to like try to like trigger this event? Because they're likely only going to be a couple of the tiles are going to even have events. So it's like, do you do that first, or do you rush for something that has more action points? And that's,
which is sort of there's like a little bit of a parallel to that with Twilight Struggle as well, right? Right. With Twilight Struggle, you have a card. You can either play it for the event or you can use it for its points.
Yeah, but I guess the difference with Twilight Struggle is you have your hand of cards. Yeah. So your opponent I don't think ever manipulates you. Well, there are some things you could do to manipulate what's in someone's hand, but like you in Twilight Struggle, you have like your hand of cards. You can decide what order you want to play them, how you want to use them. But this is a public board where if I do something now, you can't do that.
Right,
unless
that's
there
very
happens to be another tile that's the same tile out.
Okay.
So there's like some of that like worker placement kind of tension.
Yeah.
But anyway, you do that 4 times and you're manipulating things on the board. And then the war phase. So I mentioned there are 4 wars that happen. War is very simple. Like, let me just be like, this is not a war game. This is more of like a political area influence kind of game, like Twilight Struggle, you know. But there's a war phase, and at the beginning of each, I guess, there are certain peace turns, like before the war, each player has these little basic war tiles that you might say like +1, 0, and some other effects. And you're going to randomly put one on this war board on these 4 spaces or however many theaters are involved in that war. When you're taking your actions, you can add bonus. Like one of the things you could spend military points on is to add bonus tiles that you could always see what yours are on different places. So you could say, ooh, like I want to go a little stronger in this area because if I win this, it has some good spoils, you know? So one of the military actions is you can like kind of beef up the result of, or hopefully the result of the war in your favor for certain theaters. And so that's cool. So the war phase is like almost like
it's like a resolution of all these things.
Yeah. So that's where you resolve everything and you flip over the tiles for a theater. And then there are certain things like having, you know, maybe control of certain markets that might give you bonuses towards your war strength. So it's another thing that kind of scores and gets resolved. Another thing you're competing over. There's lots you're competing over in this game. And then each side has their own little deck of these ministry cards. And each peace turn, you'll have these 2 cards that are face down initially. And you can pop one up, and now you have some special thing, and you can kind of like build your strategy around it. And
so it sounds like a big tool bag of things that you're working with.
Yes, and you can synergize those cards with the event cards that you draw. And so there's a lot going on. There are also these advantage tiles that you can get. Like when you hit certain spots, when you take over certain spots on the map, you'll get the advantage tile. This gives you like either a special ability or like a bonus action you can trigger, and you kind of tap them once per round. You can use them, but if you lose that territory, it has to go back. So there's a lot at play here, but it is so good. It's like I played it on Saturday, and I have been like obsessively thinking about it and wanting to play it again and reading about it, reading reviews.
What made it pop more this time? Because you said you'd played it once before, and it doesn't sound like. It seems like this time you texted me and we're like, have you played this?
Yeah.
You played this? So it's like what made it? What caught your fascination this time around?
So I think after the very first time I played it, I had very similar feels where I was like, oh, I love this game. And, you know, I can't wait to play it again and again. But it's been like I think it's been 2 years probably since I played it. So this time I played it, it's like, okay, I had already played it once. So I knew a little bit more. And I think I just I don't know, the more I play it, the more I see what the game has to offer.
Yeah.
And I feel like both times I've played, I have not actually read the rule book. Like the first time I was taught, my friend Drew taught me. And it's always one of those things where after I play it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to read the rule book, but I never did. And then in this case, we were kind of playing it last minute. So I didn't have time to read the rule book. So I just watched Game in a Nutshell's video, which is very, very great, awesome tutorial video if you want to try this game. So then I watched that just to refresh myself. But then after, I was like, now I want to read, because Christian had played more than me. So I was like, he'll fill in the gaps. But I was like, now I want to read the rules. Yeah. And the more I was reading the rules, and I'm like, we made some rules mistakes. And I'm like, I want to play this again. And I want to play it again. I love it. it's like often when I play games, I think about like I need to cull games in my collection because I have way too many games than I have space for.
Yeah.
And this is just like one of those games that's like, nope, permanent spot on my shelf. Yeah, permanent spot on my shelf. So yeah, I don't know. I'm very excited to like while it's fresh, like revisit it, try it again. Learn more.
I'm very excited for you to destroy me this afternoon, because
I won't destroy you. I
really?
won't. I don't think I did win last game though.
Because I'm like, I have to say, I'm very bad at these kind of tug of war games. Like I was so bad at Watergate. I do, and generally speaking, I actually don't love the tug of war games. But I do have Twilight Struggle. And I haven't played it in forever because it's such a good game.
Yeah.
It is such a good game.
Amazing.
And it is such a stressful game. Like you are like in a state of tension, like extreme tension for like hours on end. And on top of that, there is that element of people who, like there's a sense of you want to play with people at your same level. Although I don't know, I may actually revisit that. Believe it or not, I may revisit that feeling, that sensibility that I have about Twilight Struggle, because we are going to be talking about 18xx later, and that is an element of like being okay with not being experienced with it. And so I wonder if now that I've gotten into 18xx, if I might be more comfortable with being bad at Twilight Struggle. Yeah,
that's tough because I think with Twilight Struggle, like, if you're playing with someone who's an expert, and I'm kind of on your level if you ever want to play with. Like,
okay,
I've only played Twilight Struggle like once in person, and like once or twice on the app. And I played Twilight Struggle Red Sea like a few times, but like I'm not like one of those experienced people. But I think like even if you're new to 18xx. Like, I don't think you're guaranteed to lose as much as, like, you're sort of guaranteed to lose against people who know the Twilight Struggle cards. So I think that's a little different. But but way to be open-minded about it. Like, I'm that way, too, because you can learn something from getting whooped, too, Yeah,
well, I'm intrigued to see what this is, all the fuss is about.
And I'll be curious to see what you think, too, because I don't think it's as... Like, there's tension, but I don't think it's that... I think it's in a different way with Imperial Struggle.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is Imperial Struggle. Definitely worth checking out if you like... it's not, like, extremely heavy, but, like, if you don't already play heavy games, it'll be a little bit to learn. But they're again, Game in a Nutshell's video is really, really excellent. Very, very good tutorial of the game. So that is Imperial Struggle. What else have you been playing, Ben?
Well, I've been playing some like little card games here and there. And then we played, I think you mentioned on the previous week's episode or previous episode of this, we played Skymines. And I just want to give a quick shout out to say that was so incredibly fun. That was that was the most fun I've had playing Mombasa or Sky. I hadn't really played Skymines before. I've done it solo once, and I played Mombasa several times. And that game of Skymines, wow, that was like chef's kiss. That was so fun. It was wonderful. I feel like Skymines is now like, oh, I'm so glad I have this. But since you already talked about Skymines, I'm going to talk about a game I can't even believe that I'm talking about it here. Like, I can't believe, like, my big moment on the Board Game Geek podcast. Where my face may potentially be on the front of Board Game Geek, and I'm going to be here talking about this game. I can't believe it. But we played Gold West recently.
Yes.
And Gold West is from 2015, designed by J. Alex Kevern, and published at that time by Tasty Minstrel Games. The player count is 2 to 4. I wrote down 2015. Like, 2,000 people can play this game. But I think it's getting a re-release. It looks like it because the art on the BGG page is completely different
from yours.
Yeah, so I don't know who is re-releasing it. But either way, it was released by Tasty Minstrel Games. So I acquired it in 2015, actually as a review copy, because I had a little blog that I was like trying to basically write board game coverage for, and it's like lying dormant and sad, but that's fine. So Tasty Minstrel actually sent me this game. I'm like, am I still obligated to say that they sent it to me? So this is a game that plays in about an hour, and it uses Mancala mechanism at its centerpiece, where basically we're all prospectors. I think maybe in the American West, specifically California. I think it's a gold rush Feels like considering it's called Gold West, I would say it's the Gold Rush.
Yep.
It's definitely
Sounds
feels like it's on the West
I'm
Coast.
believing you.
Pertains to gold. And basically we're all kind of like we're excavating gold and minerals and things out of our mine shafts, I guess. And we're using that's where the Mancala mechanism comes out, because like as we pull things out of our shafts, our mine shafts, we like drop things along the way, and then whatever is like left over from this. It's hard to really describe, so I'm not even going to bother really getting to in the weeds about it. Just know
it's a Mancala.
It's a Mancala, and you drop resources off on basically a few different spaces, and when you run out of spaces, you'll have some things left over, and you use those leftover essentially cubes. I hate saying cubes because it really reduces it down to its most abstract form.
Yeah.
But in this case, you sort of have resources, some metals, maybe you have some
precious
wood.
metals. There we go.
Yeah, maybe you'll have some stone, maybe you have some wood. Who knows? And so you're going to use those things to build little tents or settlements on the game board. And then any precious metals you get, you'll be able to use them to invest in an area called Boomtown, which is basically endgame scoring points. Or maybe you'll spend those metals on, there's like a little stagecoach track, which is adorable. Little stagecoaches just going down. It's just a track.
Yeah.
That's what stagecoaches. Oh, I just flung my straw. But, so that's, you can do that, or you can use them to. What was the third thing we use our medals on in that game? There was a third.
There are like contract cards.
Contracts. That was the big thing. Sorry, everyone. I just spilled coffee like all over my laptop.
No.
No, it's fine. Just some dribbles. So, but you can use them to fulfill contracts, and that's kind of the game. You do it like 10 times. Every time you build a tent or a settlement, you are flipping over little sort of tiles on the game board, and when you flip them over, you see potential resources that you can get when you build tents there. And the resources that you do acquire from building your tent, they go into your mine shaft, and then you got to get them out of your mine shaft to put them towards the things we just talked about. So it's just sort of like a cycle. And
then there was also the bad stuff that was looting. Or
you're obligated to put a tent out on the board every turn. Like you have 10 tents, unless I think a 2-player game. I think maybe you have 12, but you're obligated to put tents out, or potentially settlements, which are like just fancier tents, and you're obligated to put them out onto the board. And if you don't have the materials to build it, then you basically, it's like the equivalent of like your face goes up on a poster in the old West town. It's like wanted.
Yeah.
It's called looting, and it's like negative points during the game and at the end of the game.
For the people who do it the most.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't like it's one of those things where you get like a 1-point penalty when it happens, and then you sort of think like, oh, it's just a point here. But it actually, in our game when we played, it actually was consequential, right? Because I think Paul, our friend Paul, we were playing with, he was looting like crazy. He was an outlaw. And he had this big lead, and then he watched his lead come back at the end of the game, and then, it all went sour for him.
Did you win?
So I won. Yeah. But the reason why I wanted to bring this game up was that when I initially got the game, I liked it, but I did not love it. Mm-hmm. I felt like it was a nice game, but it sort of didn't have like meaty decisions for me. It just wasn't, and it also was an hour long. It didn't feel like it had an arc. It just felt like you did the same thing every round until it was over. So I was like, do I keep this game? Do I not keep this game? And you had mentioned that you wanted to play it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, let me play it with Candice. And then like, if she really loves it, I'll just give it to her, Yeah. So we did a 4-player game, and it was so much fun. Yeah. And I don't know, something happened in the past 5 or 6 years where this was just like, it was 1 hour of really fun, interesting decisions.
I love that it's just it only takes an hour, and it's like, it feels like it's a good game for an hour. Like,
yeah. I mean, it kind of feels like an abstract game. I'm not going to lie.
Which I love.
Yeah. I'm not a big abstract person, but I think maybe some of the things that I saw were flaws, I'm now seeing as features, in that it is short. I am never opposed to a long game. I love a long game. I love the epic, quality of a long game. And so this one always felt like it was too long to be a filler, not long enough to be a full on game experience. But now this time around, I mean, I really felt we had a really, really fun time. There's a lot of banter back and forth. And I think anytime a game allows for a table of people to be joking back and forth with each other and like thinking about what are they going to do, it's always going to be a success.
Yeah, I thought Gold West was great. And yeah, I tried to get a copy a couple years ago at Strategicon, and Benita brought this up on an episode we did together. And she brought up World Fair, I think, is another
same designer,
game,
right?
Same designer, where there's like some area influence, area control, I think, happening in that. But yeah, I'm so glad we got to play it, because I'm definitely someone who, when it's late at night and often, especially at like conventions, when people are like, let's play party games because it's after 8:00 at night. And I'm like, I still want to play games, you know?
Yeah.
And like, that's one of those games that like, hey, we could just start at 11:00 at night and it only takes an hour, but it's still like, it's a game. You know?
It felt like a game, and it really was 1 hour.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of these games where people say it's 1 hour and then it winds up being 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's exactly 1 hour. And it's also really good because the Game Brain group, when we get together lately, Trick Takers have been all the rage, which is super fun. Lots of card games. I really enjoy Trick Takers, but what happens is that then there's not quite enough room for like a chunky 3-hour game on a game night. And so then you just wind up playing more Trick Takers or something. And so this allows for an option to do like, let's do a bunch of Trick Taker games maybe. And then now we can have like a nice 1 hour game because it'll sort of fit. It won't keep us up till 3 a.m. on a weeknight. So amazingly, Gold West has redeemed itself. It's not even redeemed itself. It probably was like this all along.
No longer on the chopping block.
It is no longer. It's saved. It lip synced for its life, and it stayed. It stayed. And I also just want to say very briefly, Orleans did the same thing for me recently as well. In that,
I heard about that. You finally played it with the expansion.
I finally played it with the
Trade and Intrigue,
which I think did I mention it on Game Brain? Is that why?
Yeah, you mentioned it on Game Brain, so that's how I know.
Still, it's the same thing. And I was like, oh yeah, the new expansion that came out like literally 7 years ago. But I'm like, oh yeah, it's brand new. But I finally played it.
When that happens,
yeah, and I was like, Orleans. I've liked Orleans, but I never loved it the way other people did. And then playing it with that, I was like, oh my god,
yeah.
Orleans is also saved, and
way cooler with the expansion.
Exactly, and both those games, TMG, and I both received them as review copies. So took a few years.
Ben, look at you.
Took a few years, but I finally have come to embrace them both.
Awesome.
And that was Gold West.
Cool. Well, I recently played something not nearly as old as Gold West, but something that I've had for a while, that I've been wanting to play for a while, and that is, I started my Undaunted Stalingrad campaign.
Wow.
Yeah, and this was like one of my most anticipated games of Spiel 22, and thank you to Osprey Games who sent me a copy because they know I love all the Undaunted games.
I think, may I say, I actually saw a real-life Osprey this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Go on.
Go on. But Undaunted Stalingrad is a game that came out in 2022. Last year at Essen, and it's designed by David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. And this is basically a standalone campaign game in the Undaunted series, like Undaunted Normandy, Undaunted North Africa. I recently talked about Undaunted Battle of Britain. Like all of the Undaunted games, it's a deck building World War II game, and it's, multi-scenario. But the main difference is, like in the other standalone Undaunted games, you could optionally string together the scenarios in sequence to play them as a campaign, or you could just play one-off scenarios as games. But this game was designed, and you have to play it as a campaign with the same player. It is something where you can reset it, though, and play it with another player, switch sides, whatever. So it is like replayable. You're not putting stickers on things or tearing anything up.
That's good.
And that's one of the really cool things about it. So each player has their own scenario book. I'm playing with my good friend Jake, who Ben knows.
Love
Jake.
Love Jake.
Love Jake. And I am playing as the Soviet army, and Jake is playing as the German army. And so we each have our own scenario booklet, which is new because in other Undaunted games, you just have like one standard scenario book. But now we have our own. And before each scenario, you read this briefing, your own briefing, so it's secret, and it's like telling you the narrative of what's happening, but from your perspective, and they're different characters that are in your crew, and it was really cool because it's just like we got really quiet and we're just like reading our books, and but it's like, it feels thematic, right? Because it's like in a real war scenario, like, I don't know what they're planning to do, what the other side is planning to do. They're making their plans and having their discussions on their end. And, I'm doing that too. So, that's really cool. And then, the other thing is we played the first 2 scenarios. I won the first scenario. Woo!
Good for you.
Yeah. But it was cool, not only because of that, but it was cool because we were kind of like I hadn't even cracked the rule book until Jake got over there, and like we went through the whole thing together, and it was really, really fun and exciting to kind of like start this campaign together. But at the end of the first game, we then you have this pile that you keep of any casualties, like any of your soldiers that get
don't make it to the end of the game.
Yeah, they don't make it, and the way that the game deals with this is it has this table, like a casualty table, and there's a threshold. So like if you have no casualties, you don't permanently lose anyone. If you have like, I think it was like 1 to 4, then you're going to permanently lose one of those soldiers. If you have like 5 to 9, you're going to permanently lose 2 of them, I think is the range. And then what you do is you take your whole casualty pile, you shuffle the cards, and you randomly, so in the first scenario, we both had to like permanently lose 1. So you flip the card and you're like, that was my machine gunner from squad A. Oh. And what you do is you have this reserve deck of cards, and then you go and you find each of the cards has this little code on it. So you find the reserve version of that person, of that soldier, and they come in like looking a little injured, and then their actions that are available are more limited, a little bit weaker. So you still keep the same amount of like riflemen and gunners in your deck, but some of them might be just like these weaker reserve versions. And then on the other end of that, you also upgrade 2 soldiers each game. So then we got to take the rest of our deck and shuffle it. Yeah, and then we got to like level up 2 characters, and now we have new actions on them. And so that was really exciting. I also will just give a quick thank you and shout out to Folded Space, because they sent me the Undaunted Stalingrad like custom folded space insert. Okay. Which at first, like one of my friends was like, I don't even know why you would need that. But the main game does come with, the base game comes with an insert, and it's like one of those like black plastic trays. Yeah. But the folded space one, not only does it have like cool thematic art, it has like card slots that are labeled. So it's like, this is your available deck, this is your reserve, this is your upgrade, this is where you put removed cards. And you just sit it on the table such that it faces, like Jake's decks are facing him, mine are facing me. Then we each have our own little token trays, which are really nice, and it like makes setup such a breeze. I don't like putting them together. Look, I do not like putting those together at all, but now that it's done and we're playing with it, I'm like, it's a dream. This is clutch.
Well, I think that anytime you get an insert that's not just about organization, like when you put things in the box, not only is it organized, but like I like inserts where you can take things out and they sort of turn into trays or they turn into whatever. And when the game is done, like you just put the trays back in and you're set. Yeah.
And that's what this is. Like when I had already pre-built the insert and had everything organized. So when it came time to play the game, it's just like bloop, bloop, take the trays out, sit them on the table. Everything is nice and organized. So I really, I dig that. And like I said, I don't know, so far, then when we started the second scenario, we're reading our briefing, and now it's like things are getting more meaningful, because at the end of every scenario, you write down in your little logbook who won. And then based on who won, it tells you which briefing to read next and which like scenario you're setting up next. So it's a branching narrative.
Oh, that's very cool.
And I'm so excited to see where it goes, but Jake ended up clapping me in the second game. And I don't know if that's by design or if it's just historical that he got. I'm not going to mention the card, but he got a special card, a special soldier that killed a lot of my people. Yeah. It was not pretty. It was not pretty. But so now we're 1-1, and we will see. We will see where this goes. But so far, we are like both like, We're enjoying it, and it's like
good.
also cool because it's gonna be so like each scenario only takes about an hour to play.
Oh, really?
You know, yeah. This is not long, so now we can like just pick a weeknight here and there and keep it going and like knock out 2 scenarios.
It reminds me oddly a little bit of Mind Management, which
I haven't played it yet.
You will love it. First of all, it's great. It's a great hidden movement game. But one of the features of it is that you can play it just sort of like you can just play the game, but there is sort of like a quasi campaign to it. They call it the shift system, where essentially, there's the person who is hidden, and there's the other 3 people who are trying to find them.
Yeah.
And each game theoretically takes about 45 minutes to an hour. Although I've definitely played games that went really long, and no complaints. It was like tense and wonderful. But then, like, whichever side loses gets to take, like, open up this box of cards or something like that. And it'll give them an advantage for the next game. Like, the idea is that you play several games over the course of the night. And so you're unlocking, each side unlocks advantages based on who wins. So it sort of reminds me of that when you mention this idea that, like, depending on, who wins, you do a different scenario, and like coincidentally, Jake wound up with some sort of like super soldier.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I'm wondering if he would have won if I would have ended up with something, or if maybe this is just kind of like the path of the history why that happened. Well, we'll find out. I'm definitely like one of the things I knew about this game even before starting the campaign is that like. Also, the tiles, which all the art is so gorgeous in this game. It's Roland McDonald, and he just like the soldiers look cool. Like even the injured soldiers, I don't want them in my deck. I don't want them in my my available cards. But it's like such a cool feature that it's like, ooh, we took this hit, and this is what happened to Jimmy or whoever. They all
clever.
have names on them.
Oh, I
have
love
a lot of female soldiers too.
By the way,
Soviet side.
I love that they have names because I have this ongoing thing with board games, which is that if you're going to have characters in a board game, you should name them. You always should name them. And I base that off of Dead of Winter.
Yes.
Because Dead of Winter has all those characters and they're all named. And the amount of sort of storytelling that just naturally happens at a table when you have named things. Like, I'm sure that you and Jake were like, oh my God, you hit Scotty O'Grady or whatever your character's name was.
Every time I had a little moment of silence for all my people. Yeah.
Like Baseball Highlights 2045. Great 2-player game, by the way. It technically does 4, but all the little baseball players have their little names, and as you play, it's like, oh, here comes this person again. I forget. I haven't played in a while. I forgot their names, and even Thunder Alley. I always talk about this. People don't know this.
I still haven't played Thunder Alley.
Thunder Alley is super fun. And when you play it, you're in charge of. You have a fleet of like a team of cars, and you have a play mat because when cars basically are out of the race, they go onto your play mat or things like that. But if you look closely on the play mat, you see that each car has a driver, and the drivers have names. And then if you look really closely on the play mats, you see that some of them have the same last name. And you're like, oh, they're like maybe brother and sister or something. And you start realizing there's actual like thought about the name of these play mats, and it creates a story when you're playing the game. So to hear that this game has put names on all these soldiers, I just think that's such an easy way to enrich any board game.
Yeah, and the starting deck, at least my starting deck, it was cool too because I read my briefing, and then as I'm playing and certain people's names from my briefing come up, and I'm like, oh, there she is. And
yeah, it's a great way to get yourself like kind of invested also in these characters, right?
Yep. So that is Undaunted Stalingrad. I'm so excited to kind of keep exploring and seeing like what they've done here with the narrative and everything.
Yeah, let us know how the war turns out.
I will probably give an update either midway through or when we're finished. But yeah, check out Undaunted Stalingrad. Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Ben and I just had a super fresh play.
Soup's fresh.
Really fresh that we were like, we have to talk about this.
So fresh, the boxes are still on the table because I was too lazy to lug those heavy boxes downstairs. But by the way, speaking of inserts that are functional and make life better. The one that we got for this game does that.
Oh yeah. And the game we're talking about here is Twilight Imperium 4th edition.
The other Twilight game.
Yeah, the other Twilight game. Exactly. Twilight Imperium, this is a game that has been around for a while, since 1997.
Wow.
And the 4th edition came out in 2017. It's designed by Christian T. Peterson, published by Fantasy Flight Games. 3 to 6 players, but with the expansion, you can play up to 8 players. And, I think I've talked about it before. I definitely have at some point, but it's just basically this epic sci-fi kind of empire building game where each player is going to take on the role of like one of these very like asymmetric factions, and you're kind of vying for galactic domination. You're fighting their politics. There's economics you're managing.
It's like basically Nerd Factor 50. Like it's off the charts. Like you were saying, I am leaning into nerdiness today. This is it,
Yeah, and it is just such an experience every time we play. I'm pretty sure, I don't know what my count is for the amount of times I've played this, but at this point I've definitely played a majority of my games with you, which is always likewise. A delight, especially when we're in an alliance together.
Which we mostly are in alliances. We mostly are.
Ketchup and mustard. We had that.
Yeah, we had the ketchup and mustard alliance. I almost forgot about that. I think it's because we're like the two of us are not necessarily the most aggro players.
Yeah, we're not aggressive.
So we're just sort of like,
let's pal up and be sneaky and political and
we're
defensive.
Also sitting next to each other and But the game never ceases to deliver a signature memory. Like that, I think, is really what is amazing about Twilight Imperium, is that I think almost from nearly every game I've played, I can draw a specific memory from the gameplay in a way that other games just can't. Like I remember when I played in January, there was a moment where Jake, who is playing in Undaunted, he had like all his spaceships on the central planet, which in this game is called Mechatol Rex, and a card came up, and basically it was a political thing. It was a political thing, a roll of the die. Either everything gets blown up or everything or not.
But everybody had to vote.
Everyone had
to vote to make the roll of the die thing happen, which.
So it was like, it's like this big dramatic thing, and it passes, this law passes, and is he going to get blown up, and he has to roll a die. And it was so tense, and he rolls it, and it did not work out well for him, and he lost everything. Everyone went, and like it's a tough thing. It was a tough thing for him.
Yeah.
But then we always talk about that.
He's a good sport, and and it's just like it's a memory. I wasn't in that game, but I definitely heard about it on Game Brain Podcast and from Jake and you.
And and we had a game recently where like it ended in this like very crazy way that was not necessarily even like a happy way. There was definitely like tension at the table, but like even that sort of was like that was our memory. Like, like remember that time we played the game and then there was this like meltdown and like it's kind of great for that.
Yeah, and this is like a game where usually, if you are ahead on victory points, you are going to have a target on your back. Also, if you happen to be the person who takes control of Mechatol Rex, initially you will have a target on your back because there is a way that you could potentially score a point every round if people aren't, being defensive and stopping you from doing that.
Yeah, because it's like Catan, where like first person to get to 10 points.
Just like Catan.
Guys, it's literally just like Silas Catan, so don't be intimidated. But but in the sense that like all you have to do is get 10 points.
Yeah.
All you have to
10 points in
12 hours.
Yeah. It's an all day experience. Like I think the shortest game I've ever played was 8. I think on the longer side, it's 12 hours, depending on...
I think I was in that short game with you where we're like, wow,
we had to like go to a holiday party or something. I'm like, hey, if we could get done by like 9 p.m., come on. And we made it happen. But yeah, so I mean, I think what's interesting playing the game, I just find it to be a very fun game. It's like, it's silly, but I do think there's like interesting choices and dilemmas, but it really is a very, very social game. I think at the end of the day, it is about,
convincing everyone else that you're really not as much of a threat as people think you are.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's like, and also, of course, leaning into doing things with the board, but like, it's tricky. It's really hard. And this last game was particularly fascinating because I was going for some early objectives to get some very like low hanging fruit points. And so as a result, I sort of was I was tied for the lead for
at some point
early on in the game.
You were like, that's it. That's my 5 points. That's all I'm getting.
And I genuinely, I kept on telling everyone, listen, guys, I've got 5 points in me. And after that, maybe I can scrape up a few more points. But everyone thought I was just like, you know, BSing at that moment. Everyone thought like, oh, that's just like Ben.
That's Ben. He's going to pretend he doesn't have any way to score, and then he's going to try to crush us.
And I was like, no, you guys really don't realize. I really don't have it. Like my game, I have not built up my engine. I've got no troops. I had such a thin, you know, fleet of spaceships.
You also played all your secret objectives pretty early.
Yeah, so I made myself a target, but I also knew I was like, listen, I know I look like a target. I should not be a target because my game has no legs, you know. But no one was believing me, and people don't believe me anyway. When we play games, generally speaking, people don't believe me.
I was kind of believing you, but I don't trust anybody. Like, even though you're really balancing your alliances here, so it's like, hey, let's not attack each other, okay? And then I'm like, okay, but I still like, I'm like, he might attack me or something, you know. So you just never know. So I believed you. But I also am always skeptical in this game.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is that fortunes can change, like, you know, so quickly in TI4, which is what's also fascinating about it. Like, you really don't know when you're creating a power vacuum. And it's also interesting how the board state can just influence things. Like, I felt like we had to be allies because we had a giant portal amongst our homes.
Yeah, because of the way the board got built out.
Yeah, like everyone else in the entire board could just like come into our backyard. So we kind of had to like band together to keep everyone out if necessary. So anyway, so I was like, well, my game doesn't have any legs. But then as the objectives turned over, I was like, oh, I actually think I can get that one. I was like, actually, I might have like a few more legs. And I was like, oh, I think I can get that one too. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, actually, I think I can win this. I think for the first time ever, because I'd never won it before, I was like, I think I can win this. And the only way to stop me from winning is if our friend Jordan invaded my home planet.
Yeah, because for most factions, almost all, I think all but this one faction,
yes,
if someone takes control of one of your home planets, you can no longer score victory points. You have to control all of your home planets in order to score. So Jordan was the closest to Ben and was like, this is the way we have to prevent Ben from scoring. And I'm like, do it. As much as I'm like Ben's ally, I'm like, you do it. I support you.
Yeah, even I was like, I don't want you to do it, but you have to do this.
Yeah.
Like, you have to. I hate it. I hate it, but you have to do it.
That's the play, yeah.
So, and he didn't want to because he had other things he needed to do, but he was like the one who was like pushed into like, they're like, go on, Jordan. So like, so he came over, he kicked me out of my home planet, and I was like, dang, like I was like, it was bad. And he had these giant spaceships on my planet, like just fully taken over my peoples. And I was like, I had like 2 dinky spaceships 2 tiles away, and like a carrier. A carrier is basically like it's not a combat ship. It's there to move things around.
Right.
And but my the race I was playing was the Ysaral tribes, Ysaral tribes. And their whole thing is that they can hoard action cards. And so I hoarded and I hoarded. And I was like, I have to, if I am going to take back my home planet and like clinch this victory, this is my only chance. Because if I don't do it this turn, it's all over. Next round is going to be a wash. I will not get it. And
I'm like sitting next to Ben as I'm just like seeing him try to calculate and see how he can get his planet back to like bring it home. He's like, yeah, I might have a Hail Mary.
I'm just sitting there and I'm like I'm looking through my cards. I'm looking through the actions. Look what everyone else is doing. I'm like, this is going to be a Hail Mary. This is going to be a Hail Mary.
And because Ben was able to hoard cards, he could also stall a bit. Like, where like at some point I couldn't stall because I ran out of my command, like my little action tokens. I didn't have any other actions. So at some point I'm just like, I have to pass. And Ben was kind of like waiting till everybody had to pass, and then
I was doing that, but I was also, because I wanted people to like use their action cards and stuff.
Yeah.
But also, I had a power that once everyone passes, they can't use action cards, so that would be good for me for combat.
Oh,
and then I
that's
also,
cool.
and then also I was like, I upgrade these little dinky ships. I think they're destroyers.
the destroyers. Yeah,
they only hit if you hit like a 9 or a 10. But then I had a way to upgrade them, so I upgraded them at the last second. There, it's like so. Even then, they're not amazing. But one thing that they can do is before the combat, they can like roll a whole bunch of dice.
to get
and those
some
can
hits
hit,
off.
They can hit like dinky dinky spaceships.
The fighters, yeah.
So I upgraded my destroyers so that we could roll more dice to go after the dinky ships. And I had a card that said, actually, don't go after the dinky fighters. This applies to all ships. So I was like, this is it. This is going to be it.
Yeah.
I came in with these dinky destroyers and I rolled 6 dice all at once. And I hit on 6 out of 6 dice. These little ships took out the dreadnoughts, took out everything, and then I went in, and so basically...
And then he was able to trigger the Imperial card, which let him score mid-round. And then at the end of the round, he scored again, and that got him to 10. So it was really beautiful. It was awesome. But let me just say what else was happening in the galaxy.
Please.
At the same time...
I mean, the galaxy does not revolve around me and my people?
So while Jordan had to go in and, take Ben's home planet, I got bold and decided to go and attack Mechatol Rex, which is, Jordan had captured Mechatol Rex early in the game and, was sitting on it and occasionally building up more forces, and it was very intimidating. But I was like, I have to go in there and like soften him up, and then maybe somebody else can come in and do something, So I made an attack on Mechatol Rex, but then because again, I couldn't stall, I had to, I ended up moving out of there to set myself up to potentially score a victory point next round if there was going to be another round. And then the plan was for Jason to then come into Mechatol Rex, but I wasn't supposed to vacate early, or at least I wasn't thinking about like, oh, if I vacate, Jordan's going to come back into Mechatol Rex. And that kind of pulled him away from hammering on Ben.
Well, because it didn't seem like he needed to.
He maybe could have.
But who would have thought? Like, who would have thought if there's 2 like really low level ships and you've got like 3? I don't remember what was in there, but they were like he had some big ships.
You looked very puny. Yeah,
it looked like I was totally out of it, but I had cards that made them bigger and scarier. And so, it
was awesome.
It was awesome. It was
just
like
an awesome game.
It's also a great example of like the cause and the effect, and like how many things are hanging in the balance at any given one moment. Like when Jordan gets pulled over to me, then it creates an opportunity for you, and then he goes back in, and then this. It's just like. It's such a fun game. It's like I think you can even hear in the way that we get so carried away telling the story that I'm like, do people actually care about this story right now?
I know, or are we just entertaining ourselves? I don't know. But also like the political phase. Oh, I love the political phases in this game, or the agenda phase.
Yes.
And in the agenda phase, whoever the speaker is, like the first player more or less, they get to flip over an agenda card, and it's something that we vote on, like a law or something, like, hey, vote on one player to give them some cool ability, and whoever gets the most votes gets this card and gets some cool ability. But people have these action cards, which are these like spicy kind of cards, and you can do crazy stuff. They have riders. Like at one point, I played a rider on a vote, and I said, I bet everybody's gonna pass this, and now I can't vote. But if it passes, I get a victory point. So then everybody had to think about like, oh, we don't want her to get a victory point, but do we want to fail this? And like
vote against our own interests just to stop her from getting a point.
Yeah. It's such a great game. It's
a blast.
One of my favorite games.
Yeah. It was. You know what's crazy is that my last point about it is that at the beginning of the year I created a 10x10 challenge for myself. Which I'm not doing very well on, but I put this game on very ambitiously.
10 games of Twilight.
I was like,
Imperium.
I can play 10 games because the truth is this: we always play with 6 people, but I played this game with 3 people before, and
I would be interested to play a 3-player game.
It's still,
I'm not opposed to that.
You don't get the full range of dynamic, emotional experiences but you still get a fun game of like conquest and battle and all that stuff. So I think what I want to do is get some more like 3 or 4 player games.
Yeah,
because they're much shorter. They're only like 4 hours.
I was gonna ask about the 3 player game because like the first 2 times I played it, and granted, the first time we were very new, it took us forever with 4 players.
I definitely
but we were new.
Really? Oh, because I definitely played a 3 player game once pre-pandemic, and I know that I had all day, slated for it, and then we were done in a few hours. Like, oh, okay, I guess we'll play Lorenzo Il Magnifico.
Awesome. Anyway, that was our recent Twilight Imperium 4th edition game. One of our favorites to play together.
Yeah, great game.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it is like, and I apologize if I've said this before, but it's like a lot of people will be like, I don't know how you can play a game for 8 hours. And it's like, well, you spend the day at Disneyland or something like that, and you have an experience with some friends, and like that's what
you go to a
Twilight Imperium is like more than just a board game. Like it is like an experience.
It's time with friends, actually. Yeah. Think about it like spending time with people. I mean, going to a sporting event, that could take hours.
Loving those people, hating them in moments.
Yeah, it's
laughing.
Think of it like as you're doing something with friends, an activity with friends for all that time, and I think you can really see how you can that time can speed by.
Yep. You know what song I'm humming from the 80s, right? No? Okay, well, let's try a different card. Let's talk about heist movies. Christopher Nolan with Leonardo DiCaprio and that spinning top thing? Exactly. You got the hint. It was Inception. And that's all there is to Hint Go, a super fun party game. But don't worry if you can't hum or get tongue-tied. You could be drawing what hipsters like or miming salad dressings. Whether you choose to hum, talk, mime, or draw, your teammates just need to guess the 5 answers while avoiding the forbidden one to score points and reach the finish space first. But the best hint I have for you is, if you want a game that's fun for everyone and will have you laughing nonstop, search online or check out your local game store to get a copy of Hint Go from Bezer Wizard Studio. So let's talk about some 18xx games.
Yes. Oh my goodness. 18xx.
Yeah.
Talk about long games as well.
Not all of them.
Not all of them are that long.
Yeah.
But 18xx games. Okay, so may I tell you what I tell people who have never heard of 18xx?
I would love to hear.
Who like, this is my pitch. I've said this to several people to sort of get them 18xx curious. What I tell them is, and this may be sacrilege to some people, but I really don't care, because I think this is actually a really good way to rope in new people.
Yeah.
But when I'm talking to someone and they're like, "Have you played like Ticket to Ride?" or da da da, I'll say yes, and I'll say, "Now let me tell you about 18xx," which is a pretty big jump. But I'm gonna make a case over the course of the rest of this episode that like it's not a big jump. But a lot of times I'll say, well, think about Ticket to Ride, and now imagine that you can invest in other players. So like as they are building their links across the country and they're earning points and doing well, you say to yourself, you know what? I think Candice is playing this game really well. I'm going to invest in her. And every time she gets points, I'm going to get a little kickback also. And I kind of feel like in some ways that is spiritually what 18xx games are.
I get that. I totally get that. Like, I think, and I think that's a good way to kind of frame it and pitch it to people to just get a general idea of what's going on. Like, usually I would say like 18xx is a genre of games with stock market manipulation and route building where you get to own and operate train companies. And I think for me, like one of the things that I love, I love market manipulation games. So I think that was one of the most appealing things to me about this when I first played it is how like the stock markets work. I think is so interesting, and how the players drive it with their actions and everything.
Very dynamic. Yeah, because basically it is a game of stock market and stock market manipulation, and it is a game of building train tracks. That's the Ticket to Ride part, of course. And of course, it's not like Ticket to Ride at all, by the way. But, sort of like the super bird's eye view of it is that everyone plays as investors like train investors. And what happens is in the beginning of the game, you have some money, you invested in train companies. If you're the majority shareholder, you then are now the president of that company. And you then go and operate that company because you're the president of it. And as you operating a train company means you build track, you build train stations, you acquire trains, and you run those trains from city to city. And as you go from city to city, your company generates revenue. And that revenue goes back to the shareholders, which is going to be you, as well as maybe some other people. And then you go back to the stock market part of the game, and you take all that revenue that you gained from the operating part, and you reinvest it into your company, maybe a new company, maybe someone else's company. And then everyone takes that money, and we go back into operating, and we sort of like rinse and repeat, and we go back and forth in most of them. And you are basically generating money in one area, generating revenue in another area, and that's kind of it. That is at its core what you're doing.
And your goal is to have the most personal money by the end of the game. You know? So you want to have a portfolio of shares that are as valuable as possible, whether it's your own companies or other players' companies. But yeah, and one of the things in this game that you'll be doing is you will have to manage your company's money separately from your personal money.
Yeah, I mean, think of it like real life. Sometimes people say like, "Oh, that's tricky." The personal, like my money and company money, like that money is not mine. If you were the president of a company in real life, you can't use your company's money to buy yourself a car. I mean, you could, it just would be illegal, but that's how it's like in real life. You have your money that you have in your personal banking account, and there's money in that. And that's what this game is. It's sort of a simulation of that. But it's so much more because there's so much intriguing strategy and so many interesting ways it can unfold that it does it a disservice to just say it's only about like building tracks and then you get money from it and then you reinvest it,
Yeah. This is very high level. And like each game, for most 18xx games, you kind of like alternate between stock rounds and operating rounds. And during stock rounds, you'll be able to spend money to buy shares. Everybody kind of takes turns doing that. And then after that, then that's when you operate. And usually the depending on your company's share value, whoever has the highest value is going to get to operate first. And that's when, again, you get to build more tracks onto the board, which is like, I find to be like one of the most challenging parts of the game personally. Just, I don't know, like route building is not one of my strengths.
Yeah, but that's okay because you can get through a game like this. Now, we should mention, first of all, that the reason why we keep on saying 18xx is because these games, for the most part, all seem to take place in the 19th century. So there'll be one that's called 1822, one will be 1849. They always are 18 something. So sort of like a blanket name is 18xx. And just to give some context to all of this, the genre was pioneered by Francis Tresham, who he designed the very first 18xx game, I believe in like it was 1829. I think it was like early 1970s, like 1974. I
thought you were saying it was designed in 1829.
In 1829.
Wow.
He's like, I don't want to play with my hoop anymore. I'm going to come up with a board game. No, but I think the first one, either way, it was like in 1973, 74, something like that. Like literally the Vietnam War was going on. I mean, these games have been around a long time. And 1830 came out in the 80s. And that was the one. He also did that one. It was like the evolution of, I guess, 1829. And that is the one that kind of became like the mother tongue, or that was the one that caused the entire genre to explode.
And I still haven't played it.
I haven't either, by the way. Oh my God, we're so terrible. We've
played things that have stemmed from it, though.
Yeah, because basically 1830 was that kind of created the template, and then people started making their own variations on it, and then that's where you got all these other 18
and that's one of the really cool things, because there are so many of them, and once you learn one, then it's usually just a matter of like, okay, well, what's different about this one? So you can like kind of jump to different ones and explore all these like fresh twists on them without needing to. It's like once you understand how the overall system works, then it's like endless possibilities.
Exactly. So just to drill down a little bit further about, we just gave a bird's eye view of like, you're basically investing and then you're operating and investing. What that really looks like is that you have certain parts of the game that are called stock rounds and certain parts of the game that are called operating rounds. And the general template for these games is that you have one stock round and then you have one operating round. And then as you go further deep in the game, it goes one stock round, then two operating rounds, then one stock round and three operating rounds.
Right.
That's usually the arc of these games. So in a stock round, what you're doing is you're investing in companies, maybe your own, maybe someone else's. You may be buying stock, you may be selling stock. Sometimes what you might say, I don't want to be part of this company anymore. So you just sell all your stock in it. And then you kind of dump that company on someone else who has like a minority minority position in it. And suddenly they're now the president of a company, which is most likely ailing and terrible. Right.
Right.
So there's a lot of intrigue there with stock market.
And then also with the stock market, when you buy shares and sell shares, in most of these games, you're kind of manipulating the value of the...
and which impacts the turn order and the operating round, which you were alluding to earlier, right? Mm-hmm. So then in the operating round, that's when you're doing things, you mentioned before we're building routes. And what that really looks like is that there are like hexagonal tiles that you're just physically putting onto a map. Mm-hmm. And you're starting to create all these like lines that go swirling all around. Anyone who's played Age of Steam or Railways of the World might recognize this. Mm-hmm. And so you create these routes with these lines, and then you have trains that will go a certain distance. So you'll have like maybe a 3 train. So a 3 train can go to like 3 cities.
Stops. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then each city has a value. And so you get the revenue from that. And then you decide like, I just generated $90 worth of revenue for this company. Do I want to keep it and put it in the company's treasury and use that money to like buy a better train
in the future, tracks on mountains and stuff?
Maybe I want to build a train station because your route has to always go through one of your train stations, and also a train station can block someone else's train. And then, or you can pay out the money, because when you pay it out, then you as an investor have more cash to invest when you go back to the stock round, and it also increases the value of that company's stock. So that's kind of like, I would say, how like generally speaking the games really work. Yeah,
and there's one thing we didn't really talk about with the game.
We didn't.
And the trains. So the trains get better as technology improves. But there's a concept of rusting.
It's the big bad wolf of the game. It is like the rusting is like this ominous force. The game always starts off like very gently. You're investing, but hey, I made
some money.
I made a route from like Philadelphia to Baltimore,
But
then
it's like all of a sudden,
oh, my train's evaporated.
Yeah, somebody decided to buy the first 4 train.
It's like the effect of like walking out to your driveway and someone's stolen your car, and you're like, wait a second, I had a car. There was a car that was supposed to take me on this road. I just built a road to work, and someone took my car.
Oh my goodness!
I built a beautiful road. So because as you buy trains, you start to like, you have to buy the trains in order. Like you can't buy a 3 train until all the 2 trains are out.
Yeah.
All that have been bought. So like the moment that someone buys a 4 train, all the 2 trains evaporate from the game.
Yeah.
Disappear.
It's rough. It's rough.
Well, it's rough because we didn't say that like a company must have a train.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so if you don't have a train, if a company doesn't have a train, the company has to pay for that train out of the company treasury. But like, what if you spent all your treasury buying other trains first?
Right.
Maybe you were like, I want to buy a whole bunch of 2 trains. You're like, you know what I want to do? I want to buy a whole bunch of cars and put them in my driveway and leave them unlocked.
They come out one morning and guess what? They're gone.
They're all stolen.
So there's that element of the games too, which once you kind of get familiar, it's something you'll have to like kind of be really aware of. And if anybody's teaching you an 18xx game, they should hold your hand through.
Yes, and we should mention, by the way, if your company can't afford the train, you as the president must buy that train. Like you are on the hook for it. So that means you might have to spend the cash you wanted to use to invest in something. And if you run out of cash, then maybe you have to sell some shares. So like that's why you really don't want. That's why the train rusting is terrible. Just want to clarify.
So I think like both of us kind of, fell in love with 18xx back in 2020 or roundabout then. And there's so much we love about these games.
Yes.
For me, like, first of all, I think people, if you've never played an 18xx game and you're a fan of splatter games, I think this would kind of be your jam. Like there's something about this that like captures like something that a lot of splatter games have where it's like minimal to no randomness, a lot of deep strategy compared to the like, I would say low rules overhead.
There really is.
There's not a lot of rules.
They're not.
The strategy is hard.
Some of the 18xx games do have a larger rule set, but what's really cool about 18xx is that really once you learn the 1830 rules, and I learned on 18 Chesapeake also, which is basically 1830
rules,
and once you have that, probably I would say 85% of the rules you need to know.
Yeah,
and it's actually really cool. It's like my friend Judy, who I play these all the time on 18xx.game with my friends Judy and Matt. And they are not board gamers. They visit the world of board gaming,
but they're not like having a shelf like ours with
they
a
will
million
like
games and
right. Like usually they're down to
play.
They'll play like Concordia. Yeah. They'll play like Castles of Burgundy, but they really are not. They don't like to go too much further than that. Although I've gotten Judy to play Food Chain Magnate, but the point is they're not on BGG. Yeah. They're not in the hobby. Judy actually just joined.
Oh,
she just joined.
Cool.
But the point is they're not hardcore
like
game. You never say they're hardcore gamers, but they play this game. And Judy said that to her 1830 is basically like Latin, right? It's like this is this language, and that like all these other games are like the Romance languages that came from Latin. So once you sort of know this one language, it just not only does it really easy to learn the other games, it's actually really fun because you're like, okay, like how are we remixing what I already know, which is really cool.
And that's assuming you find them fun.
Yeah, assuming you do.
Because everybody's different.
But by the way, based on to piggyback on your splatter thing, what's really cool about splatter games often is that the players create a dynamic world. Like with Food Chain Magnate, you make a neighborhood that is like reacting and evolving based on needs and demands. And that's what happens in 18xx games. You really create these very dynamic environments with your trains. Like how you build your train network is going to impact what are like the hot spots on the map, like what companies are going to do well, and everyone responds on the table as such.
Yeah, the player interaction is so rich.
It's rich and it's constant.
Yeah.
Like there's never a moment where there's no interaction. Like everything, when you decide to sell a stock, when you decide to buy a stock, how you're
laying your tracks,
where you're going to put a station, like
how many trains are you buying? When?
Yeah. You have to constantly be thinking about what the other person is doing and how they're doing it. You have to like have, even honestly with Twilight Imperium, I love Twilight Imperium. It's a super interactive game, but there's some people I'm really keeping my eyes on, but other people are across the board. I'm sort of generally keeping my eyes on them.
Right.
But with 18xx games, you are like up in everyone's business at all times.
Yeah. And it's like it's like one of those games where if you play with the right group of people, like it can be really fun. Like you don't need to take these games serious. I think
yes, it's a very social experience.
It's a social experience.
It's very much like Twilight Imperium, where it's like you have something going on the table below you, but like the amount of like jokes you're cracking around the table, the amount of like, banter that you're having. I'm not going to say the S word on Board Game Geek, but the amount of S talking that you're doing. Trash talking.
There you go.
It's really negotiating, it's really it's really, really intense. And what I love is that the games they're full of drama.
Yeah.
And it's like constant drama, and it's twists and turns. It's drama in a way that I have not seen in other games, not even Twilight Imperium, because Twilight Imperium has a lot of drama. You have like spaceships fighting, you have rolls of the dice. How's this all going to work out? You have in war games, like a game like Maria, there's a lot of drama, but a lot of the drama is like the same drama. Right. Like there maybe there'll be a backstab in Blood Imperium, but like it'll be like but the drama is going to be in a battle that happens. It's always just going to be like a battle. There'll be drama in the agenda phase, let's say. But I feel like with 18xx, the drama is like all over the place in different forms. Like there's drama with like buying stocks, someone dumping a thing on you, right? There's drama in how someone lays track. Like someone's like
placing a
station.
Yeah.
Like when are they going to buy the trains? Like when the train, they call it the train rush when the trains start rusting, because it all of a sudden you feel like you're on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And like that is like such high drama.
Right.
And so it's every single game is like that.
Yeah. It's really good. But like there are some challenges for people getting into them.
Yes.
And I think there's also, like there's certain people that probably walked by seeing people playing 18xx and being like, ew.
Like, like gross.
That looks crazy. I don't ever
want
to do that. Or ooh,
lines. It looks
yeah.
Especially because a lot of the older versions were some of them were just like homemade, or some are just look like looking. They're just like a series of hexagons and with like it's just very basic. It's like looking at Microsoft Paint or something like that.
Yeah, they're not. No, they're starting to improve. They're starting to get pretty.
Yeah,
putting some makeup on those 18xx games.
starting to look
but
chic.
Some of them, one in particular is the new 1889 Shikoku board.
Beautiful.
I haven't seen it in person yet, but a friend of mine had, and he was just like, and he plays a lot of 18xx games. He's like, it's the most beautiful 18xx game I've ever seen.
It's supposed to be gorgeous. I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. Honestly, I have 1822 MX.
Mm-hmm.
All Aboard Games has been doing a wonderful job of making really nice versions. But like 1822 MX is like, it legitimately is like, it looks great. Like the color scheme, it's inviting.
Yeah. And like then there's like a lot of these games take a long time to play, and that could be a big barrier for some people.
They do. They take a long time.
But I will say, when I started playing these, I played Chesapeake, which you could play in like 3.5 hours, and that is still very long to some people. I understand that. But like for me, I was only seeking out games that were in that like no more than 4 hours. Like there's some you can play in 2, like 1846. Like when that, like I know people can play that.
That's wild to me. But like we did over last summer, we played 18 Chesapeake off the rails, which is the sort of expansion.
Yeah.
The expansion was originally called 18 Chesapeake After Dark, which is still the funniest. But they're like, well, they say these games aren't sexy. Well, guess what? 18 Chesapeake After Dark. But we played that a 6-player game.
6 players. And Matt was new to Matt was new to that. Yeah.
And we started at like 7:00 and finished around 12 or 1, which is a long game, but it was like a night.
Yeah. It was a Friday night. Yeah. But again, like when I first started playing these, I was like, I'm only going to play the ones, like the short ones.
Yeah.
Because I love the feeling of it, but I don't know that I do, like if I'm going to spend all day and play a game, I'm going to play Twilight Imperium,
Right.
That was my initial thought. And I still definitely lean towards the shorter ones. And I'm hoping there will be more shorter ones coming,
It would be great if there were some shorter ones, just because it's sometimes hard to tell people like, okay, we're going to play this very long game. But again, it's the same mentality as Twilight Imperium, which is like you're spending time with your friends.
Yes,
and it's like, and that is like really fun fun time. And because, like I said before, these games have so much drama that it's actually a really great way to spend time with your friends.
Yeah. And then there's also like, I think another barrier is again, like the trains. Not everybody likes.
Listen, I'm not a train person. Okay. Can I just say this? I was not someone who had like model trains growing up.
Right.
I'm not someone who watches videos of trains. You know, I'm not someone who gets excited about trains. I mean, I like trains.
Yeah, fine.
Trains are fine. I like riding. Actually, I love riding a train, but I'm not like I don't put on an engineer cap and I'm not like one of those. But that's okay. Like, you know, like if the subject of this of like, oh, trains and finance. By the way, I'm also not a business person. Like.
Right.
I watch the Real Housewives. That's me. but like, don't let that deter you, right? Like, look, Monopoly. I know, you know, Monopoly is a massively popular game around the world.
Right.
That is a game about like rents, like you're charging rent. And you're gonna tell me, oh well, I have to be interested in land management in order to play Monopoly. You know, like
right.
Think about all the themes. Think about all the dry, dusty themes that we play in games. You know, like it's okay. Like just because it's trains, just because it's like a stock market, like that's okay. You'll be okay.
Yeah, and like I think we just we love these games, and I think just like me getting into war games and historical strategy games. It's like something that, like, yeah, probably when I joined the hobby, if I looked at these games, I'd be like, ooh, I'm never going to try that or something. But I'm just really glad I did. And it's like one of those things where I want to like share it with other people in case, because I think it's worth trying. You know, I don't think it's going to be for everyone or that everyone should or has to, but like,
no game will be for everyone, but everyone should be into this. So, but I will say also another thing that people get scared of is because there is, you know, a stock market and because you are trying to like figure out your money, whatever, there's like a reputation that these games are quote unquote mathy.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess they are mathy, but I don't see any harm in pulling out a calculator. You know, there's a lot of games out there that are really leaning into using apps to assist. Right. Like a lot of games will sort of like, I'm forgetting the one. There's one recently that will Deal with the Devil. Yeah. You know, like that really integrate use of an app. Waters. Like using a calculator, if I don't see using a calculator to be really that different. And it's not hard math. It's sort of annoying mental math. But if you have a calculator, it's a breeze. And it's not an issue.
And also it kind of depends on what style gamer you are. Like I'm somebody who, sure, I'll play to win, but I don't need to win to enjoy the game. Yes. And so I don't have to like overthink everything mathematically. Exactly. I am just I'm enjoying the ride. Yeah. And
the math is usually the math of like, do I have enough money to start a company? Like, and you have to, and this way you can just do, and usually by the, you know, you might get like these are thinky games. So at some certain point, you just don't want to do the math. So you just pull out a calculator. There's nothing wrong with that. No one will pass judgment. It makes life easier. But I think the other thing is, to me, the biggest hurdle I think there are for people in terms of approaching 18xx, and this is the one that I really want to change people's minds about. Like this is the one. Like this is the when we talk about demystifying 18xx, I think this is the point, that these games are only for hardcore players. You know, I know I did just say like, well, I was talking before about my friends who are not very hardcore, but like this is,
they got into it because they just had fun.
Yeah, these are games that have a reputation for being incredibly like intense, and it's like for the like a really specific niche of people in board gaming. And I'm here to say that's not the truth. It does not have to be the truth.
Nope.
I think it's all about how you approach these games. And I have some advice for people.
Please share.
People who feel like they're not like either experienced enough or feel like they're not adept enough or they're not good with math or whatever. I feel like I have some advice on how the best way to dive into HNXX and to like have a great time while you do it. So my first thing, and I think this is the most important thing, we've talked about this before, is that, and this may seem totally counterintuitive, but you have to approach it like a party game. You really do. You have to view it as like, take it seriously, like it's a serious game, but also
like we're just sitting down, we're gonna have fun.
Sitting down to have fun.
We're gonna have a good time.
You know, like you've got your bowl of, it's like treat it like beer and pretzels.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's not beer and pretzels, but treat it like that because there will be rough edges. There'll be things that will happen. And the more you can sort of view it as like, this is time I'm spending with my friends and we're having a fun time. And oh no, that just happened.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that crazy?
We're going to be talking about this all night.
Yeah. Like you're going to have a much better time.
Yeah.
I think, because there are going to be moments, by the way, your trains will get rusted. And when you did not want them to be rusted. A company will get dumped on you. Someone will do something terrible to you. Yeah. Something bad will happen. It's going to happen. There are sharp edges in these games, but you have to see that as like comedy and as a twist and a turn in this entertainment. You also have to see this because, by the way, in advance of coming on this podcast, Judy and I were hanging out over the weekend. I was like, oh, I'm going on my friend Candice's podcast. Yeah. And we spent a whole lot of time trying to like break down what it is that we really like and how we feel what's been successful for her, Yeah. And I think in some ways you have to look at 18xx games as a form of entertainment that you are participating in, but also watching. It doesn't mean that you're being inactive, but you are just how you sit down to watch a TV show and you want to see where it goes. Right? Like with an 18xx game, there are so many plot twists. Like things are constantly happening that you would not bracing for.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of fun to be had to be like, oh my God, that just happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
I also think you have to accept failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know this doesn't,
especially when you're like new to it and you're learning. Like,
yeah. Like, I know this actually might sound like some people may be like, why do I have to do all this mental prep work? But also, because it's to show that like you can't, if you have this mindset, you can really dive into these games and have a great time. And like, just know that in your first few games, you are probably not going to win.
Right.
Just because it's not that anyone's a better player. It's just there are pitfalls that you cannot anticipate. Like I cannot teach this game and make you aware of all the traps you're going to fall into. There's tons of traps, but see that as like, look at that as like the fun. Look at that as the comedy. Like, oh, well, that just happened to me,
Yeah.
Right.
And then learn from it and
like
try
you get
to
better.
Prevent it next time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when you're learning a sport or learning a skill, you know, you're going to mess up at things.
Right.
And like be okay with messing up, right? Like just like sort of just throw yourself into it and see, and then you sort of pick yourself up and you go at it again. Yeah. Right. You know, and like find the joy in that.
Totally.
Another thing is a lot of times it feels like everything is like it's all over. It's done. Someone rusted my train. Someone my route got ruined. This or that. There's so many times when things are so bleak in this game, but like I also feel like those are moments where it's like an interesting challenge to dig yourself out of that hole because you can dig yourself out of holes in 18xx.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. But there's enough successes that for me personally, whenever I'm just like my back is against the wall, I've had enough successes that I have this like strange optimism that I can pull myself out of it. Whether or not that's like just like like naive.
Yeah.
Who cares? Because it's fun for me to dig myself out. And then there are two other things. These are smaller points. Okay. But these are things that my group really enjoy doing, which is when it's late in the game, sometimes there's not much to do with the map. So like have some fun with the map. Like, don't be afraid to like make some fun swirly tracks. I know that sounds so stupid, but it's actually like a really like we have
creative,
a lot of fun.
Like you're making art or something.
Well, not art, but sometimes we have a lot of fun looking at the board and we say, look at this mess that we've made. Look at these chaotic routes and like, oh, and look at that area over there. It's like it's going off to nowhere. Someone should like save that route, like add it on to something. It doesn't have any impact, but just like nice to do. But like it's a way of finding like joy in the game in that way. And also, by the way, a lot of people will have a lot of opinions of like, well, you know what, on a fourth stock round of 1842, you should never do this because you should always do this. Don't just play the game the way you want to play it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do you ever find that like sometimes people have very specific things like you might as not well play this any further. If you did this, you're pretty much destined to lose. I'm always
well, I'm gonna do
come
something
at me.
different. Yeah,
Come at
exactly.
me, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think if you have a good teacher, they're gonna like get you into this game. And one of the things you mentioned at some point when we were talking about 18xx was just like, you know, you can, when you do know someone who knows how to play it, like you can get into the game pretty quickly and learn it as almost like it's a video game tutorial.
Yeah, I think that like it actually should be taught like a video game tutorial, which is actually kind of the way Jennifer taught it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of immersive because I'm not one of those people that's like, I'll learn as I go. And I like to get all my rules up front. But I actually think that when you say all the rules up front, it actually can intimidate people.
Yeah.
But when you just sort of ease into it, I think as the teacher,
it feels a lot more mellow.
Yeah, as the teacher, just like ease someone into it, like just teach them about routes and running trains and people and just layer in the stuff, and people can pick it up pretty easily.
Yeah, and then we were also like brainstorming, like, you know, if there are players out there who are new to this and want to kind of like dip their toes in and maybe give it a try because maybe some of this sounds fun to you. There are a few recommendations. Like I have talked about me and Jonathan Cox from John Gets Games have talked about Dual Gauge, which is not an 18xx game, but it borrows some mechanisms, some familiar mechanisms like the trains rusting and the stock market manipulation in a much shorter package that's a lot easier to digest. So that could be like a way to try something, see if you like what it's doing, and then kind of pivot from there. We also talked about 18 Chesapeake, which was an early game, my first game, but early games for a lot of people because there's not a whole lot of extra chrome. You know, it's kind of a smooth system, small map.
But still a very fun game, by the way.
Fun.
It's not like you're playing, like, it's not like Candyland. Like, you can still have a lot of fun playing it. And by the way, another perk to all this, I think we've sort of alluded to it, is that all these games have a lot of depth within themselves, but there's so much fun in also exploring all the different remixes.
Yeah.
You know? And
you can explore a lot of them on 18xx.games, which Ben talked about already. And
it is such a good site. At the first time I went there, I was like, this looks kind of like dry, but it's not. It's not. It's a super user-friendly site. It has an extremely liberal undo feature, which is so key because you can make mistakes. You can go back. Like it really empowers users. I would argue that 18xx.games is the best out of all the automated game sites that are out there.
It enforces the rules a bit so that like you can't illegally place track.
Right.
And it kind of helps you like see your available actions like or options when you're going to like lay track. It calculates money for you.
It's a
smooth. Good tool for like learning and just playing in general. Yeah, I agree.
It's wonderful. And honestly, you know, when my group really got into these games was, as I mentioned before, at the height of lockdown, and it was like the Delta variant. It wasn't even Delta. It was before Delta. There was a period of time where Los Angeles became like the epicenter of coronavirus. It was like December of 2020, and so people in LA, which is where we are, were like really not going outside.
Right.
And so Matt, Judy, and I would get onto Zoom. And we would just play these games on 18xx.games.
You play
and
them all the time.
We just played them nonstop. So like I have a very warm place in my heart for this website because this website actually helped us get through
That's cool.
like a national emergency, you know?
Yeah. And then there's City of the Big Shoulders, which I've only played once.
That was my gateway.
Yeah.
That was my gateway drug because I've been, like I said, I've been curious. I'm a huge Railways of the World fan. Like I love Railways of the World.
You got me into that.
Which is the true success. That's the true next step from Ticket to Ride. And to think of like, I can have like a Railways of the World experience, but also this cool stock market element from City of the Big Shoulders. I was like, I need to see 18xx now.
Yeah, I need to see 18xx now. But yeah, those are like any other like good starting places?
Yeah, you mentioned Chesapeake and Shikoku 1889 are the ones that I would start like newbies on in terms of 18xx. And then once people are more comfortable with the system and want to start exploring new maps and new games, I think the next 1846 is often and has been frequently also lumped in the category with good intro ones. I actually don't think it's
a
great
lot
intro
going on, I feel.
Yeah, it has enough, because I did play it with a friend who was her first 18xx game, and there's half pay and there's a lot of private companies, and she's very smart and she's very good, and I think she actually won that game, by the way. So proof that you can win on your first one. Okay. But there's enough stuff in 1846 that I think it should be a next step, not a starter.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
18 Los Angeles is a variation on 1846, and it's super fun.
Never tried it.
So play that one on 18xx.games. And then 18MX is also, it's pretty bare bones, but has enough little stuff in there. It's like a good way to dip your toe into the world of mergers and things like that.
Yep. And then I've played 1882 was I think the second one that I played. Mm-hmm. That was good. I
love that one.
Yeah.
I love that one. It's a little it's nastier. Like the tiles run out. That's where you get tile drama. Where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna send my railroad route off, just straight ahead to this city. It's like, oh my God, that tile isn't there anymore. I can't do that. My entire strategy was based off of being able to build that city. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention another good one that I think is
good intro.
Intro or next step. Maybe next step would be 1848 Australia.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's a next step.
Maybe next step.
It's just enough stuff.
But it's good. I love 1848 Australia.
That's a great one. That's a great one. But 1882 is super fun, but it is much sharper edges in that. Things can go crazy in that game. And 1849 is also very interesting.
And it's supposed to be short, right?
Yeah,
it's one of the shorter ones.
A lot of these I've really only played on what they call it dot games.
Yeah.
When I say that, that, the community often just calls it dot games because 18xx dot games it's annoying to say after a while. But that's a fun one, and that introduces a concept of hex trains, which I'm not going to get into, but it's like a different kind of train, so it changes your thinking a little bit, I put out a brutal but fascinating is 18 Ireland, which I'm currently playing. It is really brutal. It is a nasty little game. I love it. And actually, Judy, Matt, and I were on the East Coast this past weekend, and we were all on the same flight back to LA. So we all fired up our laptops on the plane, and we started up a game of 18 Ireland, and we spent 6.5 hours on that flight. It went by in a second because we're all playing this game. And it's I don't feel like 18 Ireland gets enough love, but it should. But it's really good. And then if you want to, then when you start getting into bigger remixes, you have 1817, which is a really good one to explore the madness of a financial game where it's really about stock manipulation.
That may be our next big game.
I think that might be my number one, 1817, okay. My favorite.
That'll be our next big 18xx game, but our next big game is going to be Here I Stand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's sidebar.
Sidebar.
I'll talk about that after.
Yeah, and then the last one I'll mention is 1822, which is another sort of ecosystem of 18xx games, which is very, very fun, but it has a lot of extra new rules. So sort of work your way up to that one.
Yeah. So again, we mentioned some people just don't like the theme of trains, so that could be a turnoff. But there are a couple games you can check out if you want to try these mechanisms with a different theme, and one of them is City of Big Shoulders again. Mm-hmm. That has that shares some elements. Then there's a game that's coming out. When are we getting this? Because I don't know, but I pre-ordered it.
I feel like I've seen this one on 18xx.games. I'm like, what the heck is that?
21 Moon. It's basically an 18xx game where you're running mining corporations on the moon. Sure. And I pre-ordered it or either Kickstarted when all board games. I'm just wondering, hopefully.
I mean,
it's been a while, it seems. But anyway, that's one I'm excited to try. Just because it's a different theme,
take.
But different take. Then one that I haven't tried yet is Rolling Stock Stars. That's basically an 18xx inspired card game. There's no map. It's all about the stocks and financial stuff. So if you're into that, but you don't want to deal with trains, but you want to run companies and mess with stocks, that's supposed to be excellent. And then I have Poseidon, which is an 18xx game that's themed as like you're exploring and you're building trading posts, and there's no trains. It's like, I don't know if you're exploring in the Mediterranean, and it's by I think it's by Helmut Orly, yeah, or like I don't know if it's both of those guys or just Helmut, but that is another one that you can try. It's an older game, so it might be hard to find, but like,
well, Helmut Orly and Leonard Orgler often goes by Lonnie. In fact, he has Lonnie Games. He is always playing around with the ideas of 18xx. He has a game, 18 Mag, which takes place in Hungary, which flips everything on its head. I can't even describe it on here without just getting to like it'll be like you guys will all fall asleep as I try to do. But he takes something and he turns it on its head, and it's totally fascinating, and he's always remixing things and playing around with it. So if you're ever looking for something that is kind of like a funky, you were like, what's something that like was gonna do a funky remix? Like, look for his name. Oh
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I remember hearing about 18 Mag, but I definitely have not tried that yet.
It's funky. It's the game. It is the 18xx that feels the most like speculation, because basically, let's see if I can do this at a high level. That's gonna make sense. Which is that, you are not buying shares in train companies. You're buying shares in companies that basically offer services to train companies. So like, but you still run train companies. So like, if I'm the president of the Ben Company, and I want to build over a mountain. I can't remember this is an actual service in the game, but it's just an example, sort of like an example to illustrate it. Let's say I want to build over a mountain. So I will use the mountain building service, something that will let me build on mountain hexes. And so because I used that service, the value that service got some revenue, like that company, that little company got revenue. And therefore those who've invested in that service have done well. So it's almost like saying, here are the train companies. I think this train company is going to build over a bunch of mountains. So I think, therefore, I'm going to invest in the mountain company this round because I think it's going to be used. So it really is a game that puts speculation front and center in a way that is totally fascinating.
Neat. Speaking of totally fascinating.
Totes. And Lonnie.
Yes. We played 1880 China. And this is the new reprinted version from Lookout Games. Came out Spiel 2022 as, again, one of my most anticipated games, because ever since I've been playing 18xx, I've just heard so many people speak so highly of 1880
like a
China.
Game, right?
Yeah. And I never figured out how to make my own print and play version, could never get it. So I was so excited to finally, that they reprinted it. And this was originally released in 2010 by 00 Games, which is, again, Helmut Orly and Lonnie Orgler's. They had a company together called 00 Games, which is 18xx related, one of the tiles. And these are the same. This is the same designer duo that created Russian Railroads.
Yeah.
So
there you go. For everyone who's like, what did those Russian Railroads guys ever do? They've been doing 18xx games.
Yeah, they've been doing all sorts of 18xx
I think they did 18. Did they also do 1848? Don't quote me on
one of them
that.
did. I think so. No, I think you're right. I think you're right. Don't quote us though.
Don't quote us.
But 1880 China, you could play it with 3 to 7 players. We played it with 5, and it's set in China. And it actually does a lot of things differently than I have experienced. And all of it's so good. Like, for example, we mentioned the usually the flow of a game is stock round, operating round, stock round, operating round. Mm-hmm. Not in this game.
Not in this one. Remix. No, this one is basically you just operate and operate and operate, and then once all the trains of a certain type have sold out, or the game might just, if no one buys a train for a certain amount of time, the rest of that type of train will go away. So like the 2 trains, if we've all operated and no one's bought a 2 train, the 2 trains will go away. And the moment that all the trains go away, we literally stop the operating round
mid-turn.
Someone is operating their company and we have a stock round.
Yeah.
And then we do that when we come back. And that is wild because you never know when a stock round is.
Yeah.
So like sometimes stock round might be for a while. Sometimes it can be right away. It depends on how quickly people buy trains.
It's a weird little thing. It's spicy.
Yeah, it adds like an element of timing because it's like, should I buy this train to force a stock round, or I don't want to buy this train because I don't have enough money to spend in the stock round, so I would rather not buy this train even though my company needs the train so I can get some revenue because I think that Candice, who's operating in 3 turns down, might trigger it. So hopefully I'll get enough money by then so when we're in stock round I can invest and be useful because
Yeah, and then another thing that's different about 1880 China from a lot of 18XX games is the turn order for the operating phase. So usually in an operating round, the turn order is, again, whoever has the highest stock market value. That company's going to go, and you just go in descending stock market value order, and that's how you operate. So it can change throughout the game.
Yep.
But in this game, there's a track on the left side of the map, and it's a par price area. So I think 100 is the highest par price.
And just so people know, we talked about how, you invest in a company and then you might become the president of the company. When the company is new, just in general for any 18XX game, when the company is new and you decide that you want to invest in it, you're basically starting the company. You decide what the stock price is going to be initially, and that's called parring the company.
Yes.
And you decide like, I want this company to start at $80 per share.
And it's mostly like, how much can you afford to spend to float the company, meaning to like make the company operational?
Yes, exactly. Because in some games you have to buy 50% of the stock before a company can actually be operational. In some games it's just sort of right out the bat you can do it. So anyway,
so you want to make sure you have enough money. But in this game, when you set that par price, you're pretty much kind of positioning yourself in a permanent turn order position.
Yes. Exactly, because I think it's 4 at each price.
4 at each price,
where
I
it's
think.
like you can par over the course of the game. 4 companies may be parred at $100 per share, and 4 may be parred at $90 per share. And by the way, generally speaking, the par value matters because that's how much money it will affect the amount of money your company will start with. And so the higher the par value, what's good about that is your company will have a lot of money to start with. And in this game, you'll also be at the top of the turn order.
Right, and then. Also, I think there are about 12 companies.
I think there might actually be 16 companies or 18 companies.
But just to say, like, there's a chance that all those companies will get started in your game. So only 4 of them will be able to par at 100. And it's first come, first serve.
So when you par your company, you're not only thinking about, the amount of money that's going to be in the company's treasury, and you're not only thinking about how many shares can I start with, you're also thinking about where in turn order would I like to be and what's more advantageous to me. So there's like already so many more considerations just by that wrinkle. Yeah,
and then you have foreign investors in this game, so everybody's going to, and we auction for those, right? Or do we just pick them in like reverse?
We pick them because there's like an initial auction for like private companies.
Yeah.
There's almost every 18XX
it might be based on like how much money you have after that initial auction.
There's an order after that, and then basically the foreign investors are essentially they act almost like what would be called a minor railroad, which is sort of like, I'm not even going to bother getting the distinction between minors and majors, but basically, but know that there are like major railroads and minor railroads.
It's another company that you're doing less with.
It's like it can build track. And it can do things. It's just like a more limited version of a typical train company. And so in this game, the foreign investor, once you connect it via track to a specific public company that you have, then wonderful things happen. There's like a windfall of cash that comes from the foreign investor into your company potentially. There's like you get a share, you get like
it's cool
things.
And speaking of cash flowing. On the stock market in this game, when you hit certain levels, like certain spaces on the stock market, you get paid out bonuses too,
which is nice. And actually, another big thing in this game that is different is that normally when you are the president of a company, you have what's called the president share. And that's in most games, that's worth about 20%. So most people, when they buy a share of a company, it's almost always going to be 10%. Given that like there's some games of 18xx where there's like 5 share companies, so technically they're worth 20%, but whatever. So in this game, when you start a company, you decide, do I want the president share to be 20%, 30%, or 40%?
Yeah.
And the
permits.
The permits. So the twist here is if you have a 40% president share, that means you have more, you've consolidated your power even more, and everything's, you're taking over, right? But when you have a 40% president share, you're only allowed to build in one phase of the game. We didn't mention, but the game goes through several phases, like actual game phases. And so your company can only build track for one phase, and you have to decide which phase it is. But if you choose a 20% share, you have less power, so it's easier for someone to take over, like via hostile takeover. But you can operate your company, you can build track in three phases.
Yeah.
So it's just like there's interesting trade-offs in just how to do what seems like things that are for a given in any other game.
Yeah. And I mean, this game, I loved playing it. I was like, it has so much cool stuff. Like it has this communism phase. I forget what triggers communism.
It's like the purchase of the first Fortran
or something, but then the stock market freezes for a bit.
Freezes,
meaning
so then
you can sell and buy. You can sell stuff, and it doesn't manipulate or decrease your share value.
Yeah, normally if you don't pay out to your investors, you lose share value.
You can withhold,
but you can actually withhold. It has no impact, so it's really good. And this game I thought this game was unbelievable. Like I think it shot up to like number 2 immediately on my list.
Awesome.
Because I thought it was so fascinating, and the discovery, like everything was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I just realized something, or oh my God, that happens. I thought this was phenomenal, this game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The only thing I would hope is that I would love to see some of these twists in a game that's in a shorter package.
Yeah, we had a long game, but
our game went extra long. But even if it was like a normal game where it was like 5 or 6 hours, I think most people take to play it. I still I want this stuff in 3 hours or less. Make that game for me, Ben.
It would be great. It would be great to have a variant that is 3 hours, but I'm fine with like a 5 or 6 hour game. Like let's start at 7 o'clock and be done at 1 a.m. That works for me, Yeah, but my only real quibble with this game was actually this production of it, that was the real bummer because it felt like almost like a sloppiness with the production. I was really excited because it was being put out by a significant company.
We're finally gonna have this game.
And they made just it was like, okay, so there's typos, that's fine. But there were some
major typos too.
Major typos and things that could actually affect gameplay, which I always find to be inexcusable. Like there's an area on the map, I think it's Shanghai, that is an area where it's supposed to have special tiles. And so it's supposed to be marked that that's a special area.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that special area, you're putting the basic tiles on there instead of the nice tiles, which sounds like a quibble, but it actually really impacts gameplay.
I think one of the company boards, if I remember, had the wrong initials for the company.
Yeah.
And it's like little things like that, but there were quite a few of them. Yeah. And it was
there's some usability issues too.
Yeah.
There were no player aid. A lot of 18xx games have player aids that are kind of embedded in company charters.
Yeah.
And the company charters are just when you have a company, you just have a piece of paper, basically a cardstock in front of you. And it's and there was that wasn't present.
And it's everybody makes mistakes and mistakes happen, but I haven't seen any effort to fix the mistake. So now it's I spend, this money on this game and it's a little bit busted. I'm going to have to do stuff to doctor it up.
Yeah, it just felt like, you know what it was? It just felt like if this may
proofreading, maybe.
It just felt like if people had just played it through once,
they would have caught
everything. It's not like
seemed
this
like
is
it wasn't
quibbles.
played through or something.
And I'm sure they played through it, so I don't know how they missed it. But I will say I actually made a player aid for this game and put it on BGG because it just so flagrantly needs it. Because there's a lot of things that happen with different phases of the game and things change, and it's just. this game particularly, and also fonts, when you look at the market, it's hard to read the numbers in the market. I just wish they had changed some things, because this would have been like a grand slam.
Yeah,
and it's merely a home run. It's merely a home run.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you think like after all these years they're reprinting this game.
Yeah, they want to do it right.
Do it right. And then there was one other thing that kind of like, I don't know, like rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. First of all, again, I play a lot of war games, historical strategy games, and I still, and just even old Euro games, when you read in rule books and it says he and this, move his piece. I'm like, no, like stop doing that in 2022.
Yes.
Like there's no reason to do it. And I love that, like, at some point I brought it up to like GMT because I was playing a game and they were like, hey, yeah, we're paying more attention to it. We're doing something like in their examples of play. They're using female names too. Because it's like women play these games too, people. But anyway, I saw in the rule book for 1880 China, there's an editor's note that says, for barrier-free readability, the masculine personal pronoun is used in these game rules. And then in parentheses, it says, of course, this is not intended to exclude anyone. Then why do it? Why not say they?
They, or you can just write he or she or whatever.
Yeah, like he or she. Like, why do it in 2022? Like,
yeah, it's very.
And then try to like write that little note to make it seem like that makes it okay.
To create barrier free, but you're actually creating barriers. I didn't
like that.
Yeah, it's bad enough. It's bad enough that it's just always the he pronoun, he, him. But but then to put in this sentence that's almost like, oh no, it's for barrier free reading.
That we're gonna still do this. No.
Yeah, it just really it alienates.
Not cool.
It alienates like a wide swath of the audience, and we're trying. I think the thing is that like the two of us really want to enlighten people about these games. Is that condescending to say enlightened? But yeah, we're trying to we're trying to spread the word.
We want them to be more accessible. We want
more, because we see how much fun they are.
Yes,
and I think that people think that these games are for just like crazy randos, crazy randos in the corner of a convention with an engineer cap
there
on
all day.
And I think that these are games that really people from a variety of backgrounds can play.
Yeah.
And very selfishly, I want more people to play because that means it'll be easier to get them to the table. It means we'll get more designs. We'll get more
designs. Yes.
We'll also get more
designs.
content.
Yeah.
There's really not a lot of content for 18XX games. I will say, we both love the Train Rush.
Yes.
And in fact, in terms of 1880, the Train Rush has a great long, chunky episode with Eric Brocious, who is like one of like the main 18XX not content creator, but he's always on BGG commenting. He sort of just like
he's
knows
awesome.
it all.
He's such a sweetheart. Yeah.
And
I met him at the gathering.
He's like very smart, and the Train Rush did not
Train Shuffling.
I was Train Shuffling.
Train
Rush is good too. I just realized Train Rush is good too. But
Train Shuffling and Wheel Tapping.
Wheel Tapping, right?
Yeah.
So,
YouTube channel.
Shout out to all three of them.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it would be great to see more content out there.
They have a great episode on 1880, and it's really fun to listen to because we did not even scratch the surface. We just gave a few high level things of what's cool. But when you listen to them and when you listen to Eric Brocious break down all the strategy and all the considerations and like every single dimension of the game, it is thrilling, and you just want to go out and play the game.
Yes, exactly.
We're tapped out. We're
tapped out.
There's nothing left to say except that everyone should play 18XX games because they are wonderful and they're so like I'm sick of it. I'm sick of trying to make them up with just trust us. They're just like the most. They're the most. I'm telling you, they are so fun, and I just feel like people get hung up on the fact that they're trains. There's a lot of math and it's businessy, and what they really should focus in on is like the amount of laughter that we always have around the table, the amount of like, oh my God moments are like, oh my God, like Judy, I can't believe you did that. Twists and turns when you're playing a new game and you're like, oh my God, I'm just suddenly realizing the strategical implications of all this.
Also, you should go to BGG Con and then
And then,
play some of these with people.
And then all the 18X, all the season 18XX players are like, "What? You just went on that? What do you know? You don't know anything. How could you even say that? Ridiculous."
We are casual 18XX players, but Ben plays a lot.
I play a lot.
You've played a lot more than me.
I think
because I kind of split my time between the war games and the 18XX because I was like getting into both at the same time, so I didn't go as far.
This is where I went
in addition
deep.
To our heavy Euro games.
Well, this is where I went deep, but also like I am very lucky that I have like two friends who like this has really bonded us, you know. And I just brought in a new friend. Cool. I just brought in a new friend this weekend, and he, by the way, does not really game at all.
Yeah,
not at all. But
I think and I think you're a fun person to play with, so like that helps. But that's exactly it. Like, so if more people get into it.
Yeah,
it's just gonna be
and I just want to say one last point because I think I forgot to mention this before. So just pretend like you heard this earlier in the podcast, which is that one common critique with 18XX games is that because they are long, there is a sense sometimes when you're playing that like you are in a pit and you can't even climb out. You can't even have that rosy outlook that like you're just the game is over for you and now you have to wait 2 or 3 more hours for the game to actually be done. And that is a very frustrating experience. And I get that and I respect that. And no one wants to be in that position. But that's where I really say to people, really just look at this like entertainment. Really see it as like, you know, like we're going like how is this all going to work out? What am I going to do? Like, I'm going to try to still be in this game. Because
find opportunities. I feel like there are a lot of opportunities that you can still find even when you feel that way. Sometimes it's like, oh, but I could try to put some track, start building out this way and do this. And then,
just like try to like, don't dwell on the fact that like your game is over. Dwell on the fact that you as a group are creating this experience and who is going to come out on top. Like, how is this all going to resolve itself? You know, it's like athletes play all the way to the end. And what I'm basically saying is if you're playing 18XX, you're essentially an elite athlete. So, but yeah, so have fun with it.
And I'm hoping one day that Ben starts a YouTube channel where we get a good show with a fun personality like Ben showing us how fun these games can be.
Who knows?
That's what I'm hoping. Or anybody out there who's interested in making 18XX content. Definitely need more of it to kind of like show these games off to people in a fresh light.
How do we combine 18XX and the Real Housewives? 18 Real Housewives.
That's what I want to hear on your next update. I want to hear that like you're fans of your podcast, your Bravo TV podcast, Watch What Crappens, where you have gotten some of those people who never play board games into 18XX.
If I can do that, that's going to be my goal. I'm going to come back here and I'll be like,
that's your show. You play with people. You're like, hey, we're going to live stream playing this game.
What if I get some of the Real Housewives to play 18XX? Hey! How about that? That would be impressive. Like Countess Luann and Lisa Vanderpump.
Okay, I'm sure we've been talking for a long time like we always do, Ben. So we should probably stop talking so we can go play a game together.
Love it.
But thanks again for joining me. We've been talking about doing this forever and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And like hopefully listeners out there will find some value in our little conversation here today.
I hope so.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to teaching you Imperial Struggle and playing more games.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candice Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at boardgamegeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@boardgamegeek.com. Thanks for listening and happy gaming!